How you doing there? Welcome back to Babylon Talmud. Today we're studying Daf Mem Tes, Daf 49 of Masechta Kiddushin. Friends, friends. Okay, this is an interesting Daf. At the same time, it's also Erev Yom Kippur, and I don't have any time, and I got 2 episodes to record. So I guess in theory I'm going to try to keep things moving, but it's a great Daf over here. Friends, we're going to start on Daf Mem Ches Amud Beis at the Mishnah. So we have about half of Mem Ches Amud Beis to do, and all of Mem Tes, so we got work to do, but let's just get moving. So we're on Mem Ches Amud Beis, halfway through the Amud at the Mishnah. It's Kad Shili Bechos Zeh Shel Yayin V'Nimtza Shel Dvash. Interesting. So a fellow is Mekadesh a fellow, and he says, Be Mukadeshes to me with this cup of wine. And guess what? It turns out to be honey. Shel Dvash V'Nimtza Shel Yayin. If he says, Be Mukadeshes to me with this cup of honey, turns out to be wine. B'dinar Zeh Shel Kesef V'Nimtza Shel Zav. With this dinar of silver, it turns out it's gold. Shel Zav V'Nimtza Shel Kesef. Be Mukadeshes to me with this gold, turns out it's silver. Amnashani Osher V'Nimtza Oni V'Nimtza Osher. If he says, Be Mukadeshes to me under the condition that I'm poor, turns out he's a wealthy fellow. If he says I'm a wealthy fellow, turns out he's a poor fellow. Eina Mukadeshes. In any of these cases, it's a bait and switch. Eina Mekudeshes. He said one thing, the reality is something else. There's no Kiddushin. Reb Shimon Omer, it says Reb Shimon, Im hito d'shvach Mekudeshes. If it was an upgrade, so for example, silver to gold, if he says it's silver, it turns out it's gold, Matoiv Manoim, Givaldik, Payday, lucky day, said it was silver, turns out it was gold. So it says Reb Shimon, if it's an upgrade, so then all good, and they are Mekudesh, it's good Kiddushin. Says, fact the Gemara. Or says the Gemara, Tana Rabbanan, the Rabbi start, his kad shili b'kos zeh. So regarding the concept of Bi Mekudeshes to me with this cup, so we have 3 different brises for how this could play out. Tani chada bo uv'mashe b'sochu, v'tani idach bo v'lo b'mashe b'sochu, v'tani idach b'mashe b'sochu v'lo bo. Did you catch that? There are 3 different ways to understand what happens in the case when a fellow's mekadesh a fellow with a cup. One Brisa says that he's being Mekadesher with the cup as well as the contents of the cup. Another Brisa says that he's only being Mekadesher with the cup, forget about the contents of the cup. The third option is, the third Brisa says that he's being Mekadesher with the contents of the cup, he's not being Mekadesher with the cup itself, V'lo kasha, and says the Gemara, it's no problem, it depends what's in the cup. If we're talking about a cup of water, so he's not being Mekadesher with the water. He's being Mekadesher with the cup. He's being Mekadesher, here, take this cup, and you are Mekudeshes to me. If it's a cup of wine, on the other end, it's Fakert. He's being Mekadesher with the wine. He's saying, here's this glass of wine. Now, the actual glass itself is not the important thing here. He's being Mekadesher with the wine. A nice vintage of wine. And the other example is some kind of a brine. I don't know. I'm imagining, just trying to think of a practical example. Let's say something like olive oil. He's been Mekadesher with a bottle of olive oil, right? So he's giving her the whole thing, right? Take the bottle of olive oil, take it home, put it in your pantry. He's being Mekadesher with both the bottle and the oil. So some kind of a brine would be the same thing, right? He gives her some kind of a brine, and he's giving her everything to keep: the brine, the jar, the bottle, the cup, whatever it's in. Okay. So depending on what the contents are, he may be Mekadesh with the cup, maybe the contents, maybe both. Okay. So now be'etzem, for the next Amud, we're going to be, for the next Amud or so, we're going to be talking about, maybe even more, whatever it is. We're now entering into the concept of Reb Shimon, who says that if it was an upgrade, so then it works. So now, says the Gemara, V'leisli Reb Shimon, Yain v'nimtza chometz v'nimtza yain, shneim yicholin lachzer, boim alma ika denichole b'cholo, v'ika denichole b'chamra, hachonami ika denichole b'chaspa v'lo nichole b'dahava. You hear the kasha? Basically, the halacha is that if a fellow says that I'm selling you wine, and it turns out he said, right, if Shimon says to Reuven, I'm selling you wine, turns out he's selling him vinegar, or Fakert, he says, I'm selling you vinegar, turns out he's selling him wine. In that case, either one, right, says Rashi, Shneim halokeach v'amocher, either Shimon or Reuven could say, wait, I'm sorry, something did not add up here. I said wine, but it was vinegar, or I said vinegar, it was wine, whatever it is, either one can retract. So clearly, right, there isn't, wine is not necessarily objectively better than vinegar, and vinegar is not objectively, worse or better, whatever, than wine. Meaning, right, we're saying that if even in a situation where Shimon says to Reuven, I'm selling you vinegar, turns out he sells him wine, so you might think, oh wow, Reuven must be thrilled. No, Reuven could say, but I don't want wine, I want vinegar. So we see that there isn't, things are not necessarily objectively better or worse than other things. So how can Reb Shimon jump in here and say, well, if you gave something better, then it's good Kiddushin? Who says that she wanted gold? Maybe she wanted silver. Right? So says, right, so fact the Gemara, does Reb Shimon not hold of this brayse yain v'nimtza chometz, that if Shimon was selling Reuven wine, turns out that it's actually vinegar, chometz v'nimtza yain, or if Shimon is selling Reuven vinegar, turns out it's wine. Shneim yicholen lachzor boim, right? The either one can be choser, could say, but this is not what I wanted. This was not the intention. So we see that some people prefer vinegar and some people prefer wine. There's no objective answer, and therefore either one can say, hey, look, this wasn't the terms of the agreement that we were getting into. Hachanami, here also by Kiddushin. How could Reb Shimon simply say that if it was an upgrade, then it's good Kiddushin? Who's defining what's an upgrade and what's not? There could be that she prefers silver. Gold is not an upgrade for her. So now, Amr of Shimi bar Ashi, so it says of Shimi bar Ashi, Ashkechosila Abaye, that he found Abaye, the Yosef Masber le Livrei, that he was teaching the sugya to his son, and he taught thus. Hochab Mayaskino, and here what are we talking about? Kigon, Sham Lishlucho, that the fellow says to a messenger, to an emissary, to an agent, Halveni dinar shel kesef v'leich v'kadesh li isha plonis. Right, this fellow says to his emissary, says, look, I have a crush on a certain fella. I want you to do me a favor. I want you to lend me some money, and I want you to then go and, take some money and give it to this fella and be mekadisher. Right, so he says, Halveni dinar, do me a favor, lend me a dinar shel kesef, lend me a dinar of silver. Now, he's not asking the person to give him the silver. He's asking the person to actually then be the messenger to himself. The emissary should both provide the silver as well as take the silver to the fellow. Right, so going she'amar l'shlucho, that he says to his emissary, Halveni dinar shel kesef, lend me a dinar of silver, v'lech v'kadesh li isha plonis, and I want you to go and take it and be mekadesh this fella for me. V'halach. Right, so the instructions were regarding a dinar of silver. V'halach v'hilva shel zav. But maybe the emissary didn't have silver. What ended up happening was he took gold, and that is what he gave to her. So in this case, so what the machlokes between the Tanakama and Reb Shimon is that what exactly was the intention of the fellow when he said to the emissary, I want you to take this silver and be mekadesh this fella for me. Was he saying, I want you to specifically take silver? Or was he saying, look, you don't need to take the expensive stuff, you don't need to take your gold, silver would be fine, but if you took gold, so matov manoim. So that's the machlokas between the Tanakama and Reb Shimon. What exactly is the intention of the fellow in this case? So my sover, so according to the Tanakama, kpeda, that when he says, I want you to be Mekadisher with silver, he means silver, not gold. Whereas Reb Shimon says that, no, all he was saying to the emissary was, silver will suffice. If he uses gold, so that is the case. So yeah, it's true that there is no objective, one person's wine is another person's vinegar, whatever it is. But over here, the question is, what was the intention of the sender, of the fellow, right? When he says silver, does he specifically mean silver? Or is he saying, silver will suffice, but if you want to use gold, givaldi? But the Gemara says that doesn't work so good to say that, it's not, it doesn't work so good to say that, really the one who's in the dark is the fellow, right? I mean, up until now, we assume that the one who's in the dark was the fellow, right? He said it was silver. It turned out that what he gave her was gold. No, in this case, it's not between, the fella and the fellow. Over here, it's really between the fellow and his emissary. So if that's the case, his kadshi lo mi boile. If we're saying that it's really the emissary who's being Mikadesher, so then we're not talking about his kadshi li bekesef. Really, we're talking about the emissary saying to the fella, his kadshi lo, be mikudeshes to the one who sent me. Hito l'shvach hit eyu l'shvach mi boile. When the Mishnah says that if he made a mistake for her, the mistake, she's not the one in the dark, it's him, it's the sender, it's the fellow. Hit eyu l'shvach mi boile. It should be if he made a mistake for him. Nimtza. What do you mean it turns out that it's gold? Right? He said it was silver, turns out it was gold. What do you mean? Between the emissary and the fellow, it was gold the whole time. He was giving her gold. So rather says Rave, so says Rave, me and the lion of the group explained it. Who's the lion of the group? Here, what are we talking about? Kigon she'amra he lishlucha. No, it is her who's appointing an emissary. Tsevekaba li kiddushai miploni. Go and accept kiddushin on my behalf from this fellow. She'amar li, that he told me his kadshili bedinar shel kesef bimikudeshes to me with a dinar of silver. V'halach v'nosan lo dinar shel zav. And then when the emissary showed up to receive the silver, it turns out it was gold. And the question is, what was her intention when she sent her emissary? Was her intention, specifically, I want to receive silver, or was she saying, look, my understanding is it's going to be silver. If it's gold, okay, amazing, I'll take the gold. Right, so so according to the Tanakama, it doesn't work because she was expecting silver, not gold. The Reb Shimon says no. When she sent the emissary to receive the silver, it's because that's what she thought she was getting. It turns out it was gold. Givaldik. She's not so makbid. She just said that pick up the silver because she thought it was going to be silver, but gold is great too. What does it mean that it turns out that it happened to be gold? That it happened to be gold? I mean, wasn't it gold from the time that the fellow gave it to the emissary? It means that, he put it in some kind of a cloth, and when they opened the cloth, ta-da, it wasn't silver, it was gold at that point. Abai says, Abai, Reb Shimon ben Gamliel, Reb Elazar, Kulu Svirlu, Maremokim, Hu Lo. So Reb Shimon ben Gamliel, and Reb Elazar all hold that there's this concept of that when a fellow appoints a messenger and he gives instructions, the instructions are not necessarily literal, but that the sender is really just trying to make the life of the emissary a little bit easier. But if he wants to do it in the sort of more difficult way, a harder way, whatever, that's also fine. So the question is, when the sender sends somebody with instructions, are those instructions literal or are those instructions guidelines? So we just said that. So Reb Shimon Hadamar, and so we just explained how Reb Shimon says that they are guidelines. For example, if this fella sent an emissary and said, except bimukudeshes with the silver, it doesn't literally mean silver. If it's gold, that's also fine. She was just giving guidelines. Reb Shimon Gamliel did not. Reb Shimon Gamliel is as the following Mishnah: get poshit eidov misocho, mikusher eidov meachor. If we learned about a get mikusher in Masechta Gittin, a get mikusher is talking about if you have a kohen. Now, a kohen, if he divorces his wife, he cannot remarry her because he can't marry a divorcee. So if you have a kohen and he gets, he gets very dramatic, temperamental, and he gets upset at his wife and he says, that's it, we're getting divorced. And he runs to the scribe and they write a divorce and like that. Now he's stuck. If he realizes, wait, what did I do? It's too late. So therefore, what they did was they created this special kind of get where there would be at least 3 witnesses, and they would write a line and leave some space, and then they would fold it over on the space, and then they would sew it up, and one witness would sign it, and then they would fold it again and sew it up again, and another witness. It was a whole elaborate way to give some cooling off time, so that, if the fellow is really going to change his mind, then he will change his mind before he quickly gives her the get. So a get poshit is just a regular get, a regular document, right? So we say at the top of the Amud, Mem Tes Amud Aleph, get poshit edav mitocho. So a regular get, the witnesses are poshit, they sign beneath the content of the get. Mikusher, whereas the get mikusher edav me'achorv, right? They fold it up, and on each fold they sew it up, and then they sign on the outside. Poshit sheksavu edav me'achorv. If you have a regular get, but instead of the witnesses signing below the content of the get, they flip it over and sign on the other side of it. Or if you have a get mikusher, that they wrote it, and they wrote one line and left some space, and then another line, another space, and whatever, and that was then going to be folded up, etc. So, but the witnesses didn't sign it in the way that they're supposed to. They just signed on the document as if it was a get poshit. So shneim psulin. So in both cases, it's no good. If you have a regular get that the witnesses sign on the outside as if it was a get mekusher, or if you have a get mekusher and the witnesses sign, beneath the content as if it was a get poshit, in both cases it doesn't work. Reb Chanina ben Gamliel omer mekusher sheksavu edav mitocho kosher. So Reb Chanina ben Gamliel says actually a get mekusher. So you wrote one line, left some space, another line, left some space, so you'll be able to kind of like fold it up. But in the end, you know what? They didn't fold it up. They didn't go the whole mekusher route. They ended up just signing beneath all the text. So you have a get that was written as though it would be folded over, but you ended up just signing it beneath it as if it was a get poshit. That's fine. Sheyochel aso so poshit. It's no problem. You could just use it as a regular get, as a get poshit. Reb Shimon ben Gamliel Omer says, Reb Shimon ben Gamliel, hakol kimineg hamedina, that it all just depends on where you live and what the minig is where you live. We ask, I don't understand what the Tanakama doesn't hold of the concept of that we do things based on the way that you do things where you live. Of course he holds of that. Comes Rav Ashi and he says, look, in a place where the minig is that you do a get poshit, and this guy made a get mekusher, inami, alternatively, get poshit, right? Or in a place where normally they do a get mekusher, but they did a get poshit, everyone agrees that certainly that would be a problem. If you everyone agrees that if you do if you're a salmon and you swim against the current, and the current is a get mekusher current, and you do a get poshit or fakert, it's going to be a problem. Lo plige, where am I? Kuliam lo plige, divadek peda. Certainly that is going to be a problem. I hope I didn't skip anything. Ki plige, where they have a machlokes, is be'asra denihige bein beposhit bein b'mekusher. The machlokes is, what if you live in a place where it can go either way? You can do a get poshit, do a get mekusher, whatever the heck you want. V'amalei ovidli poshit, and then the fellow says, I want you to make for me a get poshit. V'ozal v'ovad lei mekusher, and they went, and then the emissary went and made a get mekusher. So, a get poshit is easier, right? It says it in the name, poshit, simple, right? A get poshit is easier to do than a get mekusher. Now we're in a place where it can go either way. Sometimes they do get poshit, you can do a get poshit, you can do a get mekusher. Now the sender requested of his emissary to do a get poshit, which is simpler. So the question is, was he saying, I specifically want you to do a get poshit? Or is he saying, look, a get poshit is fine. If he does a get mekusher, givaldik. So Marsavar paid this. So according to the Tanakama, if he says get poshit, he means get poshit. It's that poshit. Umarsavar, whereas Reb Shimon Gamliel says, look, Marimakim who lo. No, he's saying, look, a get poshit would be enough. If you want to do a get mekusher, which is more involved and requires more effort, matov manoim. Rabbi Lazar, and the case of Rabbi Lazar, who says that it's Marimakim, it's just a guidance, a recommendation, but not, it doesn't have to be that way. The Tanan, as we learned in the Mishnah, Masechta Gitin Ha'isha Sha'amra Hiskabeli Giti Mimakom Ploni. If a fella says to an emissary, I want you to accept my get for me in such and such a place, Vikibala Gita Mimakom Acher, possible, and the emissary accepted the get in a different place than they were instructed to. so that's a problem. Pasul. Rabbi Elazar machshir, but Rabbi Elazar says no, it's okay. Which means, so we see that Rabbi Elazar holds that it's oichet a marimakim, that no, she was suggesting, look, I mean, I think that where you'll find my husband to accept the get is in this place, so why don't you go to this place, and that's where the get will be. If you happen to receive it in a different place, okay, Givald, great. So that is the machlokes. So we see that Reb Shimon Gamliel, and Rabbi Elazar all hold that these are recommendations, these are not requirements. Omar Ula, now says Ula, machlokes b'shvach momin, this machlokes about, is it a recommendation or is it required? If it's an improvement, is it okay? That's only when we're talking about money. For example, silver and gold. Aval b'shvach yuchsin, but with regard to sort of like social standing, with regard to family stuff, Kohen, Levi, that kind of stuff. So then that she's not Mekudeshes, even if he says he's a Levi, turns out he's a Kohen. Doesn't work. My time I'll come. Look, I don't need a shoe that's bigger than my foot. Right? You can give me a beautiful shoe, but if it's too big for me, I can't really, it's not much use to me. So therefore, I guess, even if he says he's a Levi, it turns out he's a Kohen, which is an improvement, right? But I don't know, I guess you could say I don't need a Kohen. Is that the point? Let's say it's the point. Tanan Am Yochi, we also learn a verse like this, Moder Reb Shimon, that Reb Shimon admits, Im Hitul Shvach Yuchsim, Eino Mikudeshes, that if, there's a sort of alternative facts over here with regard to Yuchsim, lineage, so then Eina Mikudeshes, even Reb Shimon would say Eina Mikudeshes, even if he said he was a Levi, it turns out he was a Kohen, which is an upgrade, doesn't work. Rav Ashi says Rav Ashi, we can infer this from our Mishnah, the Katane, that we're going to learn, I think tomorrow. Yeah, we're going to learn tomorrow. Amanashani Kohen. If he says under the condition that I'm a Kohen, V'nimtza Levi, turns out he's a Levi. Levi V'nimtza Kohen. He says he's a Levi, turns out he's a Kohen. Nosin V'nimtza Mamzer V'nimtza Nosin. V'lo Palag Reb Shimon. And in those cases, Reb Shimon doesn't argue. I.e., he agrees that when it comes to Yuchsin, so there's no concept of upgrades over here. If he says he's one thing and he's something else, even Reb Shimon agrees that it would not work. Maskif l'ma'bar Rav Ashi, but ma'bar Rav Ashi as a kasha. Ela dekatoni, when that same Mishnah then teaches, Amanas sheyesh li basa shifcha migudeles ve'ein lo. If he says that I have a daughter or I have a maidservant who is old enough and she'll be able to help us out, she'll be like a housekeeper, like a person to help us out in the house. It'll be great. Ve'enlo, turns out he doesn't. Amanashe Einlo, he says that he doesn't have. Ve'yeshlo, turns out he has somebody to help out at home. The shvach mamenu, that's a mominist thing, right? It's a finance, right? He's saying we have this luxury. So hachinami dilo palig. Where am I? No, exactly. Meaning, if we're going to say that when it comes to the Kohen and the Levi, we're saying, well, we see that Reb Shimon doesn't say anything. Clearly, he agrees that the Kohen Levi thing, it has to be like he says. Well, if that's the case, then what about, I have some extra help in the house, and it turns out not. That's a financial thing. And Reb Shimon doesn't say anything over there. But clearly Reb Shimon does argue when it comes to financial things, like he did with the silver and the gold. Clearly he should say that, well, if I would imagine Reb Shimon's opinion would be that if he says that he doesn't have help at home, but it turns out that he does, that should be fine. After all, Reb Shimon says that by Mammon, if it's an improvement, it's okay. So Ella Polig Bereshiv Wadin L'Seifa. So rather, no, of course, Reb Shimon argues on the first part of our Mishnah that we just learned, with the gold and the silver. And he also argues he would also argue if he says that he doesn't have help at home, and he does, that would be acceptable. And Hachanami, and guess what? He also argues Polig Bereshiv Wadin L'Seifa. So here as well, he argues, and he would say that when it comes to Yuchsin, I could argue that Reb Shimon would say that when it comes to Yuchsin, if he says he's a Levi, turns out he's a Kohen, Matov Manoim, it's Givaldik. To which the Gemara says, no, that is not a good proof. Look, Reb Shimon already, with regard to mominus, whether it's the gold and the silver or whether it's the help at home, Reb Shimon already established in the first part of the Mishnah that he agrees with regard to mominus. Right? He said, for example, if he says silver, it turns out it's gold, then that's fine. So therefore, we already know that yes, if he says that he doesn't have help at home, and it turns out that he does, that's also fine. However, with regard to Yuchsin, which we don't know what his opinion is, if Reb Shimon argued there, then he should have spoken up. But because he didn't speak up, well then, that is proof that he agrees that by Yuchsin, there's no concept of an improvement. Alternatively, you can also make the argument that the help at home is not actually a mominous thing. It's actually a social standing thing. It's a yuchsim thing. Do you think that when it says that I have an adult, that when it says gedola, it means that I have an adult daughter or a maidservant? No, migudelis means my migudelis gadelis. It means that she has a good social standing. The amra he lo nichali, the amra he lo nichali, right? That his wife is going to say that I actually don't. Meaning, if he says that he doesn't have somebody at home to help, it turns out that he does. But this is a person that is very popular among the neighbors, so that might not actually be desired by his wife. Because she's going to hear what I'm talking about at home. She's going to take what I'm saying, and she's going to go among the people and she's going to relate to them what I'm saying, and it could actually hurt me. So therefore, this is actually a yuchsin thing. So therefore, Reb Shimon only argues in the first part of the Mishnah where it's talking about mominus, for example, silver and gold. But once we move on to the Kohen and the Levi and even the maidservant, we're now talking about social standing. We're now talking about yuchsin and lineage. And when we're talking, and therefore, Reb Shimon agrees that if he says he's a Levi and it turns out that he's a Kohen, that's not okay. And also if he says that he doesn't have a maidservant, and it turns out that he does, that's also not okay, right? It's not okay by the Kohen and the Levi. It's also not okay by the maidservant, because we're talking about, what does it mean, migudelis? It means gadelis. It's talking about a maidservant who's very popular among the neighbors, and therefore that might not be something that his wife wants, because all of a sudden, if she was subservient, okay, beseder, then that's helpful. But if she's somebody who's popular among the neighbors and she's going to go around, gossiping about this fellow's wife, she might not want that. So therefore, it's also a yuchsin thing, and Reb Shimon says that by yuchsin, there's no concept of upgrades. Now we get into some interesting stuff, be'etzem, until the end of the daf. Tana Rabbanan, the rabbis taught, Amanas she'ani karyona, that a fellow's mekadesh a fellow under the condition that I'm a reader. As long as he reads 3 psukim in the synagogue, he's a reader, and it's good Kiddushin. Rabbi Yehuda says it's not enough to read it, you have to read it and translate it. Yitargim midaite, what, just make up his own translation? Rabbi Yehuda says, if a fellow explains a verse literally without the commentary of the rabbis, he just explains the psukim literally without the Torah Shebal Peh, he's a nudnik. And if he adds his own embellishments, he's a nudnik. Se'elo mai targum didon. So what targum are we is Rabbi Yehuda saying that this fellow should explain, should translate? Our translate unklus, the translation of unklus. V'hani milei de omerle karyono. But that's talking about if he says that I'm a reader. Aval omerlo koro ono. But if he says I'm an expert in Tanakh, adikori raisa neviye v'chsuve, then he has to mamish be an expert in Tanakh b'diuka. He has to really be an expert in Tanakh. Amanasha anishone, if he says that I'm a learner, I'm a shiner, a learner. Chizki amar halachis, Rabbi Yochanan amar Torah. Yeah, this is a gewaltige daf, but I have to kind of keep things moving. Again, Yom Kippur starts very soon, and I have a lot to do. So Chizki amar halachis. Chizki says that he has to know halachis l'moshe misinai. Rabbi Yochanan amar Torah. Says Rabbi Yochanan Torah. Meisvei Ezui Mishnah. So we have a brisa that says what's Mishnah. Rabbi Meir Omer halachis. Rabbi Meir says halachis, like Chizki says. Rabbi Yehuda Omer medrash. Rabbi Yehuda says that it's medrash. Rabbi Yochanan said Torah. My Torah, Medrash Torah. Oh, so when Rabbi Yochanan says Torah, what's Torah? Medrash Torah. The Medrash halachas, the Sifra, the Sifrei on the Torah. That is only if he says that, right, that he's a learner. Aval Omar lo Tana. Oh no, but if he says he's a Tana, Ad Tani Ilchsa Sifra v'Sifrei v'Tosefta, then he has to know Halach l'Moshe Misinai. He has to know Sifra, Sifrei, Tosefta. Then if he says he's a Tana, then he's got to live up to it. He's got to know all the things. Amnasha ani Talmud. Right? If he says that he's a Talmud Chacham, Ein Omrim Kishimin ben Azai v'Chishimin ben Zoma. He doesn't have to be a Ben Azai or Ben Zoma. Elo Kol sheyalin also b'chol makom davar echad b'talmudo ve'omar v'afilu b'mesechta dikala. No, it means that you can ask him, whatever he's learning right now, and that's enough. If he's learning even Masechta Kala, which is just a brisa that says simple things like, a husband and wife can only be together once they have Birkas Eirisin. That is, or Birkas Nisuin, I guess. Then that is, that's enough. Even if he's learning something very simple, and you can ask him about what he's learning, and he can answer it, that's enough. If he says that he's a chacham, you don't have to be like the sages of Yavne, if you ask him the epis that requires just a little bit of thinking, in whatever he's familiar with, and he's able to kind of have a coherent, well thought out thought, that's enough. If he says I'm mighty, he doesn't have to be mighty like Avner ben Ner and Yoav ben Surya. If he's a tough guy, that's enough. If his friends are scared of him because he's a tough guy, that'll do. If he says I'm a wealthy fellow, we're not talking about like Rabbi Elazar ben Charsom, who we said in Masechta Yoma that his father bequeathed him 1,000 ships and 1,000 islands. Or like Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah, who we know was very, very wealthy. Also, mipnei osho. Well, as long as the people in his shtetl say, he's a wealthy man. Like if you saw a fiddler on the roof, if I were a rich man. If you're the Gvir of Anatevka, that's enough. If a fellow says under the condition that I'm a tzaddik, I feel the Rosh Hagam. Even if he's pasha, a wicked fellow, Mikud Eshes, Shemahir Tshuva B'daito, maybe he had to hear her Tshuva. If he says under the condition that I'm a nudnik, I feel tzaddik gamor mikudeshes. Even if he's a tzaddik gamor, then he says that he's a nudnik, but he's actually a tzaddik. Maybe he thought about the getchkis, and therefore that would make him a rasha. So therefore she is mikudeshes. Asar kabim chochma yardu laolam. 10 measures of wisdom came down to the world. Tishanot Eretz Yisrael. Eretz Yisrael took 9 of the measures of wisdom. Ve'echad kol olam kulo. The rest of the world got shared the remaining 1. Asar kabim yofi yardu laolam. 10 measures of beauty came down to the world. Tisha notlu Yerushalayim. Jerusalem got 9 of them. Ve'echad kol olam kulo. And the final measure of beauty was split among the rest of the world. 10 measures of wealth came down to the world. Tisha, Notla, Romi, Rome took 9 of them. The final measure, the final 10%, was split among the rest of the world. Yud Kabim Anius, Yardu La'olam, 10 measures of poverty came down to the world. Tisha, Notla, Bavel, Bavel took 9 of them. And the final one was split among the rest of the world. Asar Kabim Gasus, Yardu La'olam, 10 measures of haughtiness came down to the world. Tisha Notla Elam. Elam took 9 of them. Ve'echad kola olam kulo. And the final measure was split among the rest of the world. Vegasus lebavel lo nochis. We said that Bavel got the 9 measures of poverty. And we're saying Elam got the 9 measures of gasus, of haughtiness. But we're saying that Bavel didn't get the haughtiness. V'oksiv, but the pasuk says, Zechariah says he looks up, and I see that there are 2 women going out, and there is wind in their wings, and they have wings, like the wings of the Chasida bird, which of course is not kosher because it only looks out for its own species. Fine. Vatiseno eso efa, and they took this measure which was filled with like the Yetzer Hara and stuff. Between the heaven and the earth. Va'omar el hamalach hadover bi, and I said to the angel who was speaking to me, Ana hema molichos es ha'efa, where are they taking this measure? Vayomer Eli, and he says to me, Livnos labayis be'eretz shinner, to make a house in Eretz Shinner. Va'omer Rabbi Yochanan, says Rabbi Yochanan, zo chanufa v'gasus haruach, that this is chanufa, with flattery, and gasus haruach sheyardu lebavel, that they went to Bavel. So we see that gasus haruach did go to Bavel. In Lahachanochis, yes, they went to Bavel, v'ishtarbu ve'hu, d'ishtarbu ve'lahasim, but then gasus haruach went from Bavel to Elam. Katani can also infer from the pasuk livnos labayis. Meaning initially it said, what did it say? Ad ana hema molichos es ha'efa, right? So there were two of them, but then it says livnos la. What was that? V'lahena knafayim. So it was plural, but then it says singular. So it means that only the Chanufa went to Bavel, but the Gasus went on to Elam. Ini, is that true? V'amar mar sim negasus anius. But we said that a sign for haughtiness is poverty. V'anius bavelhu deika. And we said that poverty is what Bavel got. So if Bavel has poverty, then wouldn't that imply that it also has the gasus? So my anius the Torah. No, when it says that if there is haughtiness, then there's going to be poverty, it means poverty of Torah. And that was in Elam. Tichsiv, as the pasuk says, Achos lanu ktanav shadayim ein lo, that our sister is small and she doesn't have breasts. V'amar B'Yochanan, says B'Yochanan, so Elam, that's a reference to Elam, shezachsa lomod v'lo zachsa lam, that there were Talmidei Chacham there, but there was nobody to teach there because there was anius of Torah. Nobody was interested in learning there, and that was the place of gasus. Asar kabim gevura yardu la'olam, 10 measures of might came down to the world. Tisha natlu parsim, and the Persians got 9 of them, and the rest is split among the rest of the world. Asar kabim kinim yardu la'olam, 10 measures of lice came down to the world. Tisha natla modai chulei, modai took 9 of them, and the final measure of lice was split among the rest of the world. Asar kabim kshafim yardu la'olam, 10 measures of witchcraft came down to the world. Tisha natla mitzrayim chulei, Egypt got 9 of them, and 1 was split among the rest of the world. Asar kabim nigoyim yardu la'olam, 10 measures of afflictions came down to the world. Tes natlu chazirim chulei, pigs took 9 of them. Then the final one was split among everybody else. Yud kam znus yardu la'olam, 10 calves, 10 measures of inappropriate relationships came down to the world. Tisha natla Arabia chulei, Arabia took 9 of them, and the final one was split among the rest of the world. Asar kabim azus yodul olam, 10 measures of azus, which Rashi says is mamzerus. Tisha natla meishon chulei, meishon took 9 of them. Asar kabim sicha yodul olam, 10 measures of talking came down to the world. Tisha natlu nashim chulei, the women took 9 of them. Asar kabim shichrus yodul olam, 10 measures of drunkenness came down to the world. Tisha natlu kushim chulei, the kushim took 9 of them. Asar kabim sheina yardul olam, 10 measures of sleep came down to the world. Tisha natlu avodim, the avodim took 9 of them. Ve'echad natlu kol olam kulo, and the rest of the world took the final measure. Friends, that was Daf Memtes of Masechta Kiddushin. Some pretty interesting stuff on this daf, but I have to shtickle run. But very, very interesting daf. Peace out.